Hell yes. I don't know if you can see that flickering light there. I'm trying to. I'll try and. I'll keep in the darkness. I think they're only running on the battery on that. Is that better? Yeah, that's better. Okay. Why the Irish don't deserve freedom. Now, this is going to sound like a troll. It's going to upset a lot of people, but it's a fact of life and you have to learn how to live with it. This is the big fundamental problem with the Irish people. Uh, the Irish identity has been forged in the last 1,000 years in a belief that there is a destiny of Irish independence and the rule of our own country from within as a sovereign nation by our own people. This is a understandable and a very, common sense idea, mainly because we are an island, so therefore, along with Iceland, the most geographically defined nation in Europe. There's no doubt about it. The nation is defined by the shape of it, the size of it, and predominantly the fact that it is an island lends itself to the concept of sovereignty and independence. But culturally, we still have a lot of growing to do as a people. Now, prior to what you would call the invasion of the English invasion of Ireland, the British invasion, which took place with the Anglo-Normans, who were invited with the permission of the Pope, and this is a very important thing, in order to give Ireland to the English crown. The Irish have, since then, if you look at history, a slave mentality. Now, it hurts me as an Irish person to say this, but we are a nation of slaves. Now, not slaves like you have the African American slaves. The bondage within our minds is a belief that we cannot transcend the need for a daddy to take care of us. Now, it's very easy for people to say that the Irish were made this way by British colonialism. And I'm not an expert on history enough to know that's true or not. But it seems to me that prior to British colonialism, we had no problem acquiescing to Christianity, particularly under tyrants like Brian Boru. Now, people in Ireland think Brian Boru was some kind of great hero. Brian Boru was basically a traitor. He turned his back on the Brehon laws and crowned himself the Ard Rí, the High King, and then marched on Dublin and basically threw out the Vikings and that had been there for 300 years and built a prosperous city-state and returned Dublin to Christianity again. Now, this is a fundamental aspect of all this. When you look, and now I'm not besmirching the brave men and women over the centuries who fought for Irish freedom. There's no doubt that people like Patrick Pearse and, the Raleigh and Tom Clark, and these were fine men. These were noble, virtuous men, as were the majority of men and women who followed them. And their aims were genuine. In the wake of the Great Famine, it was shown that there was absolutely no way that Irish people could allow London to actually run us ever again. They just had to go. They had to go. Now, this had been simmering up, leaving out millions of things. This had been simmering up to the First World War. The first Home Rule Bill was enacted in just prior to World War One. That was when, for the first time since the Union had been established in 1801, the Union of Great Britain and Ireland, which unified Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales into one country. The Home Rule Bill had been passed by the majority of the population, and this would then postpone because of the outbreak of World War One. But prior to that, there was the Northern Unionists, and it has to be said quite rightly, said that Home Rule would equal Rome Rule. And it's very easy to attack people like Carson and Craig up in the north, but they were absolutely proven right that these Irish were misguided. They may have fought for Ireland's freedom, but it's no use if you're marching into battle mauling a set of rosary beads for a dictator in the Vatican. And ostensibly, that's what Irish independence had been, servitude to Christianity. And it still continues to the present. And this is the primary reason why we don't deserve our freedom. Now, we had a conflict in Northern Ireland that lasted about the best part of 30 years, called the Troubles, from the 1960s to the late 1990s. Over 3,000 people were killed. And it was along religious lines. You can sit there and say, well, it wasn't really about that. And yeah, and there's a lot of truth to it that the IRA weren't motivated by religion or anything like that, and that were many Protestants in the IRA. But ultimately, in terms of on the street, in the ghetto, it was rosary beads. It was the King James Bible against sets of rosary beads. Both sides were slave to foreign religions. Now, when you're a slave to this Christian religion, your mind is ultimately put in a position of servitude. One God on heaven, one rule on earth, one king, one Kaiser. There used to be during the War of Independence, they would have a famous photograph of the Irish Citizens' Army outside, which was a socialist army, outside Liberty Hall in Dublin, and a big sign behind them said, "We serve neither king nor Kaiser, but Ireland." But the fact is that they were all fanatic Catholics. Now, a lot of this is brought about by the fact that people didn't have the education back then they did. But even James Connolly, the leader of the Irish Citizens' Army, a Marxist, was a devout Catholic. And ultimately, yes, it's Rome rule, but before Rome rule exists because you want Abrahamic Middle Eastern rule. And the same thing happened on the other side. They may go, okay, we're not going to have Rome rule, we'll have the King James Bible through a Presbyterian religion. But who's the head of that? The Queen of England, or the King of England at the time. Again, a master, a slave. It's a slave mentality on both sides. But this is a huge issue for us as a people. Now, at the moment, there's an election going, and you have this woman called Gemma O'Doherty. I never met the woman. I'm not putting her down. Her religious beliefs are her own business. But she seems to have this same nonsense going on that we are a Catholic nation. No, Catholicism is as much of a colonial force on this island as the British Empire was, as the Normans were, as the French tried to be in the 1700s. Just as much a colonial force. It's acquiescence to a foreign dictatorship based in Rome, which is ultimately a religious version of the Roman Empire, which has been infected by Abrahamic religion. In this case, Catholicism. When she goes into a butcher shop in Swords in County Dublin and says, "What are you doing preparing halal meat for?" she is in no position if she follows the laws of eating fish on a Friday in Ireland, because that's also a foreign religion that's not Irish. And this is why I will not support any independence or any kind of sovereignty rule in Ireland, because ultimately it always comes down to religion. It's everywhere. It's infected by it. And it's not, it's Christian. It's always Christian. You look at them all, they're all fundamentally Christian. And you go to these Irish patriot websites, and all they want to talk about is getting out the Muslims, making Ireland white, and all this. And then, wearing Celtic t-shirts. The only reason Irish people in Ireland support Glasgow Celtic is sectarianism. It's no other reason. You know nothing about soccer. The Scottish League is not that interesting. It's only because the other side are Protestants, you're wearing a Celtic jersey. Don't give me this thing about it was an Irish tradition, was founded by Irish people. It's only for that. And the only game that you're interested in is the game against Rangers. Why? Because it's sectarian. It's the same factions that fought it out for foreign kings and foreign religions. This ultimately the same Jewish religion from the Middle East, from the Bronze Age. A slave mentality. And this is why I will never support any of you. I will never support anything you put in that case, in terms of that. If you came forward and said, "I'm in favour of a completely secular Ireland where no religion has any kind of uh, say in anything, and they all pay their taxes, you would get my vote tomorrow, even if you never said I'm a pagan. Even if pagans were part of that, it wouldn't bother me. But not to this date, none of them challenged the Abrahamic laws. You see, our current Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, who's a Hindu, seems to spend half his time brown-nosing Muslim groups. I don't care if you're Muslim, I don't care if you're Jewish, I don't care if you're Christian, but don't be telling me that that's the religion of my people. There's a song, an awful song by the stupid song by the Wolf Tones called The Teddy Bear's Head. And it's a metaphor for, Ireland shaped like a teddy bear. And the teddy bear's head is a metaphor for Ulster under British control. And then there's a lyric that goes in it, and then bring in your foreign folk to mix in with your breed. Before you know it very long, you wouldn't know your creed. Meaning, you're supposed to be a Catholic if you're Irish. And there you go. No, I will not accept that. I will forget neither king nor Kaiser, neither Quran, Bible, nor Talmud. That's my thing on it. And even if someone came to me and says, okay, let's make a pagan Ireland, I say, no, I don't agree with that either. All government should be secular. Secular in how it thinks, secular in how it functions. So, again, I saw Gemma O'Doherty and she's saying all these things about, oh, this is Holy Catholic Ireland and all this stuff, and we have to come back to the... Look, Mrs. O'Doherty, if you're watching this, there are 800 babies in a septic tank up down the road in Tuam, County Galway. And those things have been rumoured to be all over this country. We have the Magdalene laundries, we have endless sexual abuses by the Catholic Church. The hurt is still out there by lots of people. Lots of people. And you're promoting this. If you wanted to push some kind of... And then you're applying this Catholicism with patriotism? Are you serious? The same old cancer infecting us. I don't care if you're a Catholic, a Protestant, a Jew, a Muslim, an atheist. That's okay. But don't be telling me that that's what you believe in is the ideal. I don't go around telling people, oh, your life is a mess because you don't follow pagan laws or pagan creed. Because this is why I'm a pagan. And here's the primary reason why I'm going to be, let's say here, right? I'm not evangelizing here. I'm throwing something out there. Consider me the cheese in the devil's mousetrap, or the cheese in Pan's mousetrap, okay? Paganism has no central tenet, just like Hinduism. There is no one book that tells people what to do. There is not one book that tells people how to pray and how to think. There's not one God. Gods and goddesses are metaphors of everything within the human nature, the human psychology, the natural world, and the cosmos. Therefore, you are confronted by the belief that everything has a special nature about it. Animism, okay? And even your country. You see, I don't serve Ireland. I serve Era, the goddess of this land. And she is not a Catholic. She is not Hibernia, begging Britannia for crumbs. She is a sovereign female goddess. But she is not the ruler of this land. She is the mother. There are other archetypes. Lugh, the Morrigan, goes on, the Crom Cruach, you can name them all. They're all there. Bring in the Hellenistic pantheon, it's all the same, okay? But it ultimately makes you more tolerant in a healthy way, where you're not seeing that your version of Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah is threatened by another version of Yahweh, Jehovah, Allah. And you don't see that your identity as a person, let's say, look, what is really what we're talking about here is culture, okay? And culture is a very valuable thing and must be maintained. It can change, it can adapt, it can be incorporated in different ways, but it must fundamentally be protected in some way, because culture is really what binds the people together. The Irish will never be slaves because the culture is Christian. It's as simple as that. It will never be that. No, Jesus Christ walked on these lands, no matter how the British Israelites and all the others tried to make out the Ark of the Covenant was buried in Tara. No, Middle Eastern fictional characters from Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism originated from this country. Our people were invaded first by Roman Christianity, brought here by something that's been called later on St. Patrick. Almost certainly it was a colonialist war. They didn't bring a Roman army. He probably, whoever St. Patrick was or what he represented, probably brought over tons of Roman gold. And just like how the British later conquered India, approached the different kingdoms and chieftains around the country, offered them money, and that's how he bought an army. And his magical fire at Tara was almost certainly burning Tara to the ground. And that's why King Lear was the last Druid king of Ireland. It didn't happen by osmosis. It didn't happen because our people were, thought this stuff from the Middle East was better. It didn't happen like that. They would have had the same resistance to it than these so-called nationalists have today to other Abrahamic religions from the Middle East. Except they probably would have been more tolerant. I'd imagine they were probably quite tolerant. You will find that in the history of all pagan societies, they were always generally more tolerant of other religions than the Abrahamic ones. So, I read about the great heroes of Irish history. Yes, they were tremendous human beings, and many of them tremendous, many men and women. But it's like you cannot be free. You see it with the African American folks as well. It was the slavers who whipped them in the fields, put them on the ship, put them to America and the Caribbean, and whipped them in the cotton and tobacco plantations. Now they're holding the same King James Bible that their slave masters were using to oppress them by using the Book of Ham. This is what I'm trying to say to you. And every so often I'll have people contact me, and it'll be someone on Facebook or somewhere else, and they say, "Oh, Thomas, you got to help. Ireland's in a bad way. You're very popular. Everyone likes you. Can you come up here and do something for our movement?" And then I see all these fuckers with, Celtic jerseys on them. All that's missing is them waving Vatican flags, and they're all talking about, Christian this and Muslims that, and it's like, no, I will not have anything to do with you for that. I won't come near you for that. You're like the American Bible Belt types who think that the only place you can get morality is from the Bible and human decency from the Bible. They seem to think the only way you can get Irish freedom is through Christian stuff. And I find that tragic as much as I'm appalled by it. And you'll find that they're actually very hostile to pagan people. Now, when I say pagan, I'm talking Wiccans or something like that. I'm talking about like someone who's actually aware if they're in their European pagan roots. And I understand the irony of that also is part of an invasion, when we say an invasion, a movement. But ultimately, when you look at the spiritual archetypes of that's phenomena, it's identical to stuff all over the world. There's a very basic level of spiritual identity inherent in all human beings. That's pagan, and it's all very similar, no matter where you go in the world. And this is what you don't seem to understand. And I just, I understand, I know people in the past may have had different approaches to this. And those things like sectarianism drove them into different corners and stuff like that. But there's no way in hell, anyone from another religion is going to make me more Catholic. This is what I find amazing. Even this Lisa Smith woman that's come back from Syria, who joined the Irish military woman who joined the Islamic State. Everyone's going on about, she probably killed Christians. She probably killed all kinds of people, or maybe didn't. We just don't know that. But this is a big thing in Ireland. She killed her own. Who was her own? Christian? They're not your own. They're not your own. And this is where it's all gone horribly for me. Is this religiosity infused within our people. And until Abrahamic religiosity, and until we learn to cast that off, I really don't see a future for us as a sovereign people, because we'll always be subservient to Allah, Jehovah, Yahweh, the same triple abomination from the east. That's not ours. These are warlike religions, all three of them. And with the exception of Judaism, which to its credit is not evangelical, but the other two, Christianity and Islam, absolutely are. And when Gemma O'Doherty's in a butcher shop in in Swords in North County Dublin, demanding to know why there's not rashers and sausages in that place. She's not doing that because she's an Irish patriot. She's doing that because she is a papist. She's doing it for the ultimate overlord, big daddy, dictator. The one that gets into your mind, and that's the one in Rome that ultimately goes back to the one in the Middle East. Now, Gemma Doherty, if you ever saw my videos, I doubt you would, or even your followers, if you want to look to Ireland as an independent, sovereign country and have our people thinking that way, don't have them idolizing a Bronze Age, Middle Eastern, monotheistic deity from the land of sand and goats, and is exactly the same land that you're claiming this invasion religion of Islam comes from. Because what you're doing is you're throwing petrol onto a fire, trying to put it out. Be secular. And those of you who follow her, try to take the Christian out of you. Because you know something? That's the slaves, chains and manacles across your fucking soul.